I don't consider this a win if you're, call it team tariff. I don't think this is enough to say, see, we told you the government's collecting all this revenue. Consumers aren't being impacted. I think you got to wait. I really think this is going to be a September, October conversation. Episode number 39. Welcome back. This is the Expected Returns Podcast. My name is Luttman. I am a real estate investor and agent here in the capital region of New York State. A lot of fun topics for us today. However, before we jump in, a quick reminder, if you enjoy the content, be sure to follow us on all the socials at sjlincolnrealty, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube for sure. Again, that's at sjlincolnrealty. If you enjoy the show, you want to learn a little bit more about the office, things we're up to, more about real estate in general, at sjlincolnrealty, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. That's it for the intro. Let's get into the episode. We'll kick things off today with a quick look back at last week's jobs report before we pivot over to this week's inflation number. 147,000 jobs were added in the month of June, which was above expectations. Unemployment ticked down to 4.1%. I thought it would be helpful to peel back the layers of the onion a bit in terms of what makes up that 147,000 job gain for June. And when we do so, we see that 73,000 was in government hiring alone. And that was largely due to 47 in education. A little bit counterintuitive because everything we've seen in terms of what's been on the news is such and such a department is slashing, no one's hiring. Which is true. On the federal side, there are significant job losses. Hiring is basically falling off a cliff. Firings are continuing to happen. So the total employment base on the federal side is continuing to decrease. What we're talking about here is strictly state and local. State and local government jobs are making up roughly half of all job gains for the month of June. Does it matter? Does it matter if we're looking at 147,000 job gains for a month? Seems like a great number. Why does it matter where it's coming from? Everything I've heard is that just to break even, we're looking at 100,000 job gains per month. It takes into account people being born, people dying, immigration trends. 100 is kind of neutral. So if we're looking at, okay, we're at 147, if neutral is 100, seems like that would be a big win. I would say not all job gains are created equal. And what I mean by that is if I run a small store and I'm offering a product and I have people down the street trying to get in to buy my product, I have to go hire maybe a new cashier or someone to help with merchandise, whatever it might be. That's a pretty strong indication that I'm offering a good product. People want to buy it. I'm hiring someone. That should be a pretty strong economy. That should be a positive indicator versus, and this isn't a shot at teachers, but a teacher being added to the local school district doesn't tell us it's a strong economy or a weak economy. It's just a job vacancy within the district that needs to be filled, right? So yes, all job gains are great because whether you're public or private sector, you're still spending money on vacation, you're still going out to eat, you're still putting money back into the economy. Not all job gains are created equal. So I like to see more private sector hiring. One other thing we want to take a look at is, so we see the headline number, 147,000 jobs for the month of June. What we don't see is that these reports are actually updated throughout the month. So we see the big headline number. What the Bureau of Labor Statistics does throughout the month is that as more data continues to come in, they actually revise the number. And I put together a little bit of a chart here. I wanted to show the revisions for 2025. So the blue number, the blue graph is going to be the initial report. Orange is the revised down the road, so the last revision possible. We are seeing pretty significant revisions almost exclusively to the downside. So we see the headline number and we say, okay, that number looks good. But if half of that is in the government, not as good. And then if we say, okay, well, that's the number. But when we fast forward a few months, if it's overwhelmingly being revised down, that's less good, right? And then the last number I want to take a look at here is what's known as the household survey. So the non-farm payroll report, when we talk about job gains every month, that comes directly from employers themselves. So employers, a certain segment, are surveyed every month, how many people are on your payrolls compared to last month. That's how they project out roughly how many job gains from month to month. When we talk about the unemployment rate, so the 4.1%, that comes from the household survey. And what we're looking at here is the most recent household survey. And we want to zoom in on the participation rate, unemployment, civilian labor. Okay, perfect. So we're seeing here that for the earliest month in 2025, we have employed people at 163 million. So the government reaches out to households literally via phone. These are phone surveys, and they ask, are people employed? And month after month, they're updating. And what we see for the earliest report here for 2025 is that the household survey indicated that 163 million people were employed in the United States. And since then, we've had a whole bunch of job reports come through, hundreds of thousands of jobs being added every month. Everything should be great. And we fast forward to the household survey, which tells us that 163 million people are employed-ish. So over basically, let's call it, 4 to 5 months, the household survey tells us there are no job gains. It is flat. So to summarize, we have a heavy concentration in job gains in government. We have revisions that are consistently coming in lower, and a household survey, so a different set of data, telling us that there are no job gains. So this is something we want to continue to monitor. Obviously, employment is incredibly important, and we do want to continue to keep an eye out for any significant changes to the employment picture. Now let's swing over to this week's inflation report that just came out. Month over month change of 0.3%. Let's zoom in a little bit. And a 12-month change of 2.7%. If you were to ask the Federal Reserve what they would like the inflation number to be, it's going to be somewhere in the low twos. And they look for a little bit of inflation. They consider it good a little bit, because if let's say you're considering building a factory and you're thinking, okay, I could build it today or I could wait 12 months. If I think that labor is going to be more expensive, materials are going to be more expensive, land is going to be more expensive in 12 months, I'm more incentivized to build the factory now than I am to wait, which is good for the economy. We don't want people pushing out projects. We want them doing now. We want them employing people now. So that's why the Federal Reserve would tell you they look for somewhere in the low twos. I bet you would be the number that they would point to. So 2.7 is going to be a little bit hotter than probably their ideal number. A 0.3 change month over month. It's going to be a little bit hotter than probably analysts had expected. What some will be saying at this point is that we'll see if we had Liberation Day back in April. Where is the inflation? We had the tariffs being implemented. Everyone was saying prices are going to go through the roof. Where's the data to back that up? And I would say, hold your horses. We need to give it a little bit more time. Let's swing back to this conversation in September and October. If you are a manufacturer, or let's say you're a retailer and you're looking to sell products in the United States that you import from Vietnam or from China, and you have the president of the United States saying, hey, in 30 days, I'm going to be whacking China with 150% tariff. What is your first move that you're going to do? If I'm in that position, I'm buying as many goods right now as I possibly can before the tariffs go into effect, right? So I'm loading up my warehouses, which when you look at the manufacturing data for the first quarter, call it April and May, imports were significantly higher than they were in, call it January and February. So we did see people do this. So I'm loading up all my warehouses. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing I'm going to do is when I'm seeing first tariffs were 150%, and then 50 or 30, or I'm going to wait this out. I'm going to wait this out as long as I possibly can, because I want to see what the final rate is going to be. I don't want to increase prices on consumers significantly, scare them away. Tariffs somehow then disappear or they come down. A truce gets negotiated. I've now alienated my client base. I have to go work to get them back. That's going to be a big pain in the butt. So I'm going to keep prices as stable as I possibly can. I've got a warehouse full of goods. I can wait out the storm. I would have been very surprised if we did see massive impacts from tariffs this early on. I think this is very much going to be a September, October, where we really start to see tariffs have been implemented. The final rate is going to be this. All the deals have been hatched out. Then businesses can make decisions in terms of, what prices are going to be, how much they're going to eat versus how much the consumers are going to eat. So I don't consider this a win if you're, call it team tariff. I don't think this is enough to say See, we told you the government's collecting all this revenue. Consumers aren't being impacted. I think you got to wait. I really think this is going to be a September, October conversation. But so far, 2.7 year over year is a pretty significant improvement over, if we had this conversation a few years ago. So yeah, good news. But again, let's revisit this come the fall. Next up, socialists taking over New York City. However, before we do, a quick word from today's show sponsor, Knollhaven Capital. If you are eyeing your next real estate related project and need financing, consider reaching out to Knollhaven Capital. That is me. That is my office. I'm a broker in addition to being an investor for the past close to 15 years. Based in upstate New York, however, we have loan products throughout a majority of the country. We can help you with anything from short-term money for your next fix and flip project to you're buying a large apartment building and need long-term debt. Maybe you need a debt service coverage ratio for a small multifamily. Give us a shout. Ideally, you're looking for 2 to 3 quotes for your financing needs. I would encourage you for one of those quotes to give my office a shout. Knollhaven.com, KNOLLHAVEN.com. And there you can upload a little bit of information about your project, and we can get you some initial figures in terms of, we think this would be a good fit. Here's how we can help you out. Again, that's Knollhaven.com. If you are looking for long-term debt or short-term debt or anything in between, Knollhaven.com. Tell us a little bit about your project, and I'd be happy to take a look. Back to the show. So New York City is on the precipice of electing a socialist mayor. This story has been beat to death, so we won't spend too much time on it. I bring it up because it's actually going to bridge us to a much larger topic I want to cover in a minute. But just some initial thoughts. He has some ideas on grocery stores that I'm not super well versed in. Strictly from a housing perspective, the headline grabber is rent freeze, right? So there are roughly 1 million housing units in New York City that are under rent stabilization. And his policy he's put out there is for the next several years, your rent will not move. It's frozen. So if you're paying $4,000, guess what? That's what it's stuck at. Let's run through, I think it would be helpful, all of the players in kind of the New York City ecosystem for housing, how it would impact each one of those. And we'll start with if you're a developer. So you're looking at building a large new apartment building, and assuming you have choices, you could do it in New York City or Hoboken, New Jersey. If you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, this is the type of person that New York City, the residents want. This is the type of policies that they desire. Do I want to put a new project into the marketplace if I know my rents are going to be frozen, so my income is going to be capped? Now, the policy itself states this does not apply to new construction, okay? But if I'm thinking, well, this guy loves rent freezes, and the residents of New York City clearly have an appetite for this kind of policy, what are the chances I go ahead and build this project, and then suddenly I get the rug pulled on me, and it's like, hey, maybe your market rate for a year, but guess what? Now we got you. So I'd be very nervous. I'd be looking to build in other jurisdictions that might be a little bit more development friendly. From a tenant standpoint, your rent not going up on the surface seems like a big win. And it is, because if you live in New York City, your rent is a significant portion of your take-home pay. It's massive. So if your expense is not going to go up for the next few years, that's a huge win. However, where I think it gets a little bit messy is now let's view it from the owner operator. So you own, let's call it a large apartment building in New York City right now. Your income is capped for the next few years. So we know, okay, this is the amount I'm going to be able to earn. What's not capped? Property taxes, insurance, materials for fixing our apartment, labor. All of these costs continue to go up with inflation. Our income is not. So our incentive as a building owner is put as little back into the building as humanly possible, because we can't recoup it. I'm not going to go switch out, laminate countertops with granite if I can't, increase rents or anything. So repairs are going to be bare bones. Improvements are going to be bare bones. So from a tenant standpoint, your expense is capped, which is fantastic. The quality of your building, I suspect, the quality of your housing is going to decrease. Okay. So we have an overall picture of no new inventory coming in, limited inventory. Builders are less incentivized to build in New York City. We have the quality of housing coming down, and we have millions and millions of people that would love to live in New York City, but there's no place for them to live. They can't move. So we're keeping people out. The one benefit is going to be to the 1 million people that currently live in rent stability. But is it really a benefit? Again, if their building is becoming less attractive. So I don't like anything to do with this. I think this is terrible policy. What I do think is it paints a bigger picture in terms of what people want. And this isn't strictly a New York City thing. We are seeing policies and politicians like this becoming more and more popular. And when I think of what I'm most passionate about, which is I love free markets, I love capitalism, I don't know who I would point to and say, this is like our flag bearer. This is the person that represents what capitalism. Because really, who are we talking about? It's like Mark Cuban or like Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. Like, who are the big proponents for capitalism? I don't think it really exists. Versus on the other side, you have, your Bernie Sanders and your Mamdanis and, people getting more. There's clearly an appetite for this type of policy. I don't know who we can turn to and say, please, get our message out there. And what it has me thinking about is maybe it's not a person. Maybe it's just the policy itself that will do the heavy lifting, which takes me to the new Trump accounts, which were part of the big, beautiful bill. I love everything about this. These are savings accounts designed specifically for newborns. So once this goes through for the next few years, if you have a child, the child immediately upon birth receives $1,000 into an account. And this isn't put into a savings account, or it's not treasury bonds or anything. It's the stock market. This is $1,000 directly into the stock market. These babies now have a direct tie to capitalism. And once they start to get a little bit older, they start educating themselves in terms of, what companies are they invested in? What makes a company successful? How are the companies performing? They can then take this money once they reach 18 to go start a business, go to education, to go to college. This is a direct tie that I don't think a lot of people have with capitalism. And the only pushback I could potentially see is, well, if you come from a rich family, do we really need to give them, their children, $1,000? I would say yes. And the reason is because if we look at who the voters for Mamdani were, it was partially the poor. Overwhelmingly, it was well-educated whites from middle and upper income families. So it's not just that the poor don't have ties to capitalism. It's that the upper echelon, kind of your upper income families, they don't have the younger generation doesn't have it to capitalism either. So this is a fantastic way to make that. And when we look at all of the spending that government does, this is just an additional expense, right? Not so fast, because when they cash this out, these are capital gains. So the government is putting in the initial 1,000. This is going to grow for the next, call it 18 years. When we cash that out, that's a gain. The government is taxing that. So this is going to be a huge win for government because we're putting up the 1,000 up front. But if the stock market continues to perform as it has the past, 30 years, call it, and we're earning 9 to 10% on these kids' portfolios, this is going to be a huge windfall for government coffers. So it's not reckless spending. I would say it's great spending. It's a fantastic way to make the connection with the new generation, learn about companies, learn how industry works, learn what's great about free markets right from birth. They can educate themselves at school. I think it's a fantastic option. I think this should have been done years and years ago. I think it's great policy. And finally, we'll wrap up today with a real world example. I was representing the seller of an apartment building recently, and we received an offer. The purchase price was fantastic. The overall terms were very good. Everything looked great. I get down to section 24 of the contract, which is the other terms, which basically is when you are purchasing an apartment building, you're requesting certain information that you want to be knowledgeable about when the transaction closes. That way there's a seamless transition. You can hit the ground running. You have everything you need. I get down to section 24 and the folks are requesting nothing. It was blank. So I thought it might be helpful if we were to run through, when I'm representing the buyer of a transaction, what information we'd be looking for from the previous seller as part of our due diligence period. And the due diligence period is going to be anytime after the contract has been executed, so both parties agree on the initial terms. And then you're typically going to have something like 14 days to do your inspections and things like that. Unless you're buying large buildings, then you're going to have multiple weeks to be doing all your due diligence. But For purposes of today, this is going to be, we're looking at smaller stuff. What items should I be requesting? Okay. First item we're looking for is your rent roll. This is bare bones. This is going to be, I need to know who lives in the building, what units they reside in. And we have an example here we'll take a look at. I want to know how much they're paying, the last payment date. This is going to be, when's the last time I received a check from tenant Joe, which is different than next due for. Okay. I could have received a check yesterday from Joe. So that would be yesterday's date, but he might be due for 3 months ago. He could be very delinquent. So those two dates are not the same thing. So last payment date, when's the last time Joe paid me? Next due for, how current is he on the rent? When did his lease start? And when's his lease scheduled to end? And this is helpful because we want to know if we're planning for rent increases or if we're planning on doing renovations to the property. Maybe Joe no longer can be a tenant if we're doing major renovations. So we want to plan out, when our contractor is going to be doing work. And then we also need to know the security deposit, because if Joe does not have a security deposit, I need the owner to tell me that, because when Joe moves out and says, hey, where's my $1,000 security deposit? I can say, nope, your seller, the previous landlord told me there's no security deposit. Here's the written proof. If you want to take it up with that person, go at it, but I don't have your $1,000. So I need to have a rent roll for everybody in the building. This is the information I'm looking for. And then basic contact information too. So it's a phone number and an email address. Okay. I've heard of some people asking for social security numbers. I think that's too much. Especially at this point in the game. I think if we're towards the end, you can write into the language of the contract, hey, 10 days before closing, I need all the due diligence that you did on this particular tenant when you placed them. So background checks, if you did criminal, eviction history, things like that. I want all of that at that point. Probably a little bit too intrusive on the front end, but that is helpful information to have as well. Next item I'm looking for is lease agreements. Very important, especially depending on what state you live in, because if you have a naughty tenant and you don't have a lease agreement, well, good luck getting them out, because they could very well say, hey, I signed a 5-year lease agreement. Here's a copy of it. And you don't know if the previous owner signed this or not. It could be completely made up. So I need signed lease agreements by the current owner and by the tenant that reflects rent amount, move in, move out date. Basically, we're looking to confirm that it aligns with the rent roll. The rent roll and the lease agreements, the terms in those two should be identical, no changes. And again, this needs to be signed by the tenant. What you'll run into, especially if you're purchasing from kind of your mom and pop operators, there might not be lease agreements in place. It could very well be a handshake agreement, or there was a lease agreement a number of years ago, it's lapsed, whatever it might be. What we're looking for at that point is going to be what's known as a tenant estoppel. Basically, what I would say is your attorney wants to prepare this, and it's going to be stating the facts. This is the person's name. This is where they reside. This is the rent amount that they're paying. They are scheduled to move out on this date. We are then sending that to the owner and saying, in lieu of a lease agreement, you don't have a lease agreement, I need the tenant to sign this, because if something goes wrong and I need to evict this tenant, I need something to be able to bring to the court. And this is going to be a tenant estoppel. It's basically the tenant acknowledging, I live in this building, this is the amount that I pay, and this is when I'm scheduled to move out. Okay, it's bare bones. It's a framework of who's living in the building. It's very difficult to purchase property without lease agreements in place, because you're really setting yourself up for a huge mess if things go poorly. Next one I'm looking for is proof of payment. This is going to be the last payment that was made for each individual apartment. So if tenant Joe from our early example likes to pay via Cash App, whatever it might be, I need a copy of that. I need to see some kind of a screenshot, or if he's making, he's mailing you a check, whatever that might be. I need to see that. I need to see that it coincides with the dollar amount that his lease agreement, that the dollar amount on the rent roll, the date on the check coincides with the last payment made date. We're looking for different information to verify each other, okay? And proof of payment is proof that it's not just then the owner saying, this is the last time this person paid. This is the actual proof, okay? I ask for the last payment made. You could ask for 3 months, whatever you want to do. But as long as everything lines up, that's going to be the most important thing. Trailing 3 months of owner paid utilities. Why do we need this? Well, we know what from an ownership perspective, we know what our property taxes are going to be. That's public. What's not public is Does this person pay, let's take their water bill, for example? That's not public knowledge. I would need to request that from the seller. So I need to know your water bill. Does the owner pay any electric? So is there like a house meter for the entryway when you walk in that's billed to the owner? I need to have all these things because I don't want anything to go past due. I want to make sure everything's getting paid. But for the water, for example, if you have a massive leak somewhere and it's just pumping water, that's going to be reflected in the last water bill. So we want to be able to get ahead of that. We want to be able to make sure that we're not then the owners and we're getting hit with this massive bill that we weren't expecting. So if there's any owner paid electric, water bill is typically going to be billed to the owner. These are things we want to be requesting. Because we want to plan when we're projecting out our numbers, we want to make sure our projections are as accurate as possible. But B, and most importantly, if there are any disasters, we want to know that ahead of time. Occupancy permits, depending on where you're building, where you're buying, occupancy permits for your apartment may or may not be a thing. So if we're buying in the city of Albany, they're known as ROPs, the residential occupancy permits. Those are issued every 2 years by the city. The city comes through and does inspections. If we know we're purchasing in a property, we know we're purchasing in an area that has occupancy permits, we need copies of those showing that the apartments have been recently inspected and they're current on their occupancy permits. We get very nervous when an owner hasn't kept up with their inspections and obtaining occupancy. So we want to make sure if we are purchasing an area that has these, we want to get them ahead of time. Because what you don't want is to close on a building. You go, oh, it's no big deal. I'll get the permits after I close. You buy them, you go do your inspections, and the city says, this is not a legal apartment. You need to fix X, Y, and Z. And that's going to be, $30,000. If it's hey, this needs to have an emergency exit out the back, something like that, that's going to be not a very fun environment for you. So we want to make sure we get these up front. And if there are issues, that way it's on the seller to address them and not you after you own the building and you can't go back. T12. So now we're looking at, this is going to be, as we get into larger apartment buildings, you're going to see T12s. And this is just your yearly breakdown in terms of what's been coming in and what's been going out. So for going back to our example of kind of your mom and pop operators, they're likely not going to have a T12. It's more your professional operators that are going to have something like this, but it's tracking how much we're taking or how much we lost in terms of vacancy, what we've paid for taxes. It's all your expenses. It's all of your fees. It's everything associated with the building broken out on a month by month basis, which is helpful because that way you can kind of plan for, okay, if I know that this bill is due on this particular month, I can make sure I have enough cash on hand to be able to hold that. So T12 is just your trailing 12 month of expenses and income for the building. Next is vendor contracts. And this is going to be, again, for your larger properties. But if you have, or if the previous owner had contracts in place for, let's say, snow removal, or they came to spray for bugs, or anything to maintain the property that you would hire an outside vendor to do, likely you're going to be signing a contract to do so. This isn't going to be like a one-off, come help my building. So if the previous owner has signed a 3-year agreement, you want a copy of that agreement because you don't want people to showing up at your house to do work. And you're thinking like, boy, who are these people? I've already hired, a different company to do the same work. So we need all of our vendor contracts as part of our due diligence period. We want to know who's going to be at our property. We want to make sure these people are insured. God forbid they were to get hurt. And we also need to know how much we're going to be paying them. And we also want to know, are these contracts voidable upon sale of property? So maybe you're not going to be held to this. So these are all the documents that are going to be incredibly important to you when you're purchasing multifamily properties. You really can't get away with not having this information. So when you're looking at properties, when you're putting together offers, make sure you're requesting all this information, because what you want to avoid with all of these is you close on the property, you are now the owner, and you're scrambling to come up with this information, because it's difficult enough to operate multifamily as it is when you have all the information. But if you have a whole bunch of mysteries and you're going to the tenants trying to have them help you, sort everything out, that's going to be a very negative environment for you. So request all your information up front. This is a helpful list in terms of documents that I'm looking for when I'm purchasing multifamily, and documents I'm requesting when I'm representing buyers on deals that we want to review. Again, before the deal becomes concrete, we want to be reviewing all this information. So I hope that helps. That's going to do it for today. I hope you got something out of today's episode. I know it's been a while since we got together. that's on me. That's my fault. Do have some exciting projects in the works that I hope to talk to you about in the future. But in the meantime, you can get a hold of me if you have financing needs. Again, I'm able to help out in most of the country. You can visit knollhaven.com to learn a little bit more about that. If you're in the capital region and are looking for real estate, you're looking to purchase or sell or invest, Stephen at sjlincoln.com, sjlincoln.com/book a call is how you can connect with me. If you want more content, you can get us on the socials at sjlincoln is going to be Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram is the most active of our social accounts. Again, financing is knollhaven.com. Tell us a little bit about your project. If you're in the capital region, Stephen at knollhaven.com. Stephen at knollhaven.com. Knollhaven, Stephen at sjlincoln.com. sjlincoln.com/book a call. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.